Sunday morning in Anaheim greeted the city with typical California weather. On Lincoln Avenue, in a neighborhood where neat houses with well-kept lawns testified to the prosperity of the middle class, stood the New Hope Baptist Church. The white building with a tall spire towered over the surrounding buildings. Norbert Cooper stood in front of the mirror in his office at the church, adjusting his dark blue tie. At 42, he looked exactly how a successful pastor of a large church should look. His suit was immaculately pressed, his shoes polished to a shine. Every detail of his appearance spoke of order and control. The first parishioners were already gathering outside the office door. New Hope Church was one of the largest Baptist congregations in Anaheim, with over 800 members. Norbert had built this community over 15 years, turning a small group of believers into a thriving church with a modern building, a nursery, and even its own radio station. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Norbert said without turning around. "Pastor, it's almost time," said Philip Bell, the church deacon and one of Norbert's closest friends. Philip was a sturdy man of 55, the owner of a successful construction company, who had donated significant sums toward the construction of the current church building. His gray hair was neatly combed back, and his face showed sincere devotion and faith. "Thank you, Philip. How's the mood in the hall?" "Excellent. Full house as usual. By the way, Mirabella is already in her seat with the children." "Wonderful. Let's go." They left the office and headed for the main hall. The church was indeed full, the rows of wooden benches filled with families dressed in their Sunday best. Sunlight streamed through the tall, stained glass windows, creating colorful reflections on the walls. The organ played a quiet prelude, creating an atmosphere of reverence. In the third row on the left sat Mirabella Cooper with her two children, 14-year-old son Jacob and 11-year-old daughter Emma. Mirabella was a beautiful woman of 39, with chestnut hair pulled back into an elegant hairstyle and green eyes. The children sat quietly, as was expected in a house of God, but Jacob kept glancing at the phone his mother had made him turn off, and Emma was drawing something in the margins of the program. It was a typical Sunday morning scene for the pastor's family. Norbert took his place at the pulpit. His gaze lingered for a moment on his wife, and an elusive spark of tension flashed between them. Mirabella lowered her eyes, concentrating on the program. The service lasted an hour and 20 minutes. His sermon was masterful, as always. He knew how to find the right words, how to make people listen, how to touch their hearts. But Mirabella was not listening attentively. Her thoughts were far from the church, from her husband, from his words about forgiveness. She was thinking about yesterday's conversation with Michael, Norbert's younger brother, about how he had held her hand in his truck, parked at an abandoned construction site on the outskirts of town, about how he told her he loved her, that he had always loved her, even before she married Norbert. "We must find the strength to forgive," Norbert continued, his gaze returning to his wife in the hall. "Even when the pain seems unbearable, even when betrayal wounds us to the core." After the service, as usual, Norbert stood at the exit, shaking hands with parishioners, accepting compliments for his sermon, discussing church matters. Mirabella waited nearby with the children, smiling and nodding to acquaintances, playing her role as the pastor's wife. When the last parishioner left, the Cooper family headed for their home, located 2 blocks from the church. It was a large, 2-story Victorian-style house with a porch and a well-kept garden, a home befitting the status of a senior pastor. The children ran ahead, eager to change out of their church clothes, while Norbert and Mirabella walked silently, each lost in their own thoughts. "That was a nice service," Mirabella finally said, more to break the awkward silence. "Yes," Norbert replied curtly. "Did you listen carefully?" There was a certain undertone to his question that made Mirabella wary. "Of course. Why do you ask? It just seemed like your mind was somewhere else." They reached the house, and Norbert unlocked the door. Inside, it smelled of lemon air freshener and furniture polish. Mirabella always kept the house in immaculate order. The living room was furnished with expensive furniture, and family photos and religious paintings hung on the walls. Everything was immaculate, like in a magazine about middle-class life. "I'll make dinner," Mirabella said, heading for the kitchen. But wait, Norbert stopped her. I have something to tell you. She turned around and a look of concern flashed across her eyes. What? Michael came by last week when I wasn't home. Mrs. Adams saw his truck at our house. Mirabella froze. Mrs. Adams was their neighbor, known for her love of gossip. So what? Was he fixing something? Yes, Mirabella replied too quickly. The kitchen faucet. I told you it was leaking. Norbert looked at her with a long, searching gaze. That's strange. The faucet works perfectly. Tension hung in the air. Mirabella felt her heartbeat quicken, but she tried to remain calm. Maybe I was mistaken, she said. Or maybe he fixed it faster than I thought. Maybe, Norbert agreed, but there was no conviction in his voice. In any case, next time it's better to wait until I'm home. I don't want the neighbors to get the wrong idea. Of course, Mirabella nodded and hurried to the kitchen. Left alone in the living room, Norbert stood motionless, staring at the family photo on the mantelpiece. The picture had been taken 2 years ago during a vacation in San Diego, all 4 of them smiling at the camera, looking like the picture of an American family. But now the photo seemed like a mockery. He thought about Mirabella's expression when Mrs. Jenkins mentioned Michael, how she had blushed, her nervousness when he asked about his brother's visit. The suspicions he had been trying to suppress for the past few weeks were now growing like a cancer. Michael had always been his complete opposite. Where Norbert was organized and determined, Michael was impulsive and carefree. Where Norbert had built a career as a preacher, Michael worked with his hands, preferring physical labor to spiritual reflection. And women had always been drawn to Michael, perhaps precisely because he was so unlike the strict religious men. In the kitchen, Mirabella was preparing Sunday lunch, but her hands were shaking as she chopped vegetables. The conversation with her husband had frightened her. Could he suspect something? Or was it just a coincidence? She thought about Michael, about how their affair had begun 3 months ago. It hadn't been planned or thought out in advance. He had simply come over to help with the bathroom renovation while Norbert was at a church conference in Sacramento. They had started talking, and for the first time in years, Mirabella felt that someone was truly listening to her, understanding her feelings. Michael didn't judge her for being tired of being the perfect pastor's wife. He didn't lecture her about duty and morality. He just held her when she cried about how lonely she was in a marriage with a man who loved God more than his family. And now, she was in love with her husband's brother. It was a sin that had no excuse, especially in their religious world. But she couldn't stop. Michael gave her what she had never received from Norbert: passion, understanding, the feeling that she was needed as a woman, not as a symbol of piety. Mom, is Uncle Michael coming to dinner tonight? Emma asked as she entered the kitchen. Mirabella shuddered. No, dear. Why do you ask? He hasn't been here in a long time. He used to come often. That was true. Before the affair began, Michael regularly joined their family dinners, especially on Sundays. He was the uncle the children adored, the man who could make even the stern Norbert laugh. But in recent months, his visits had become rare and brief. He's busy with work, Mirabella said, repeating her husband's words. Lunch passed in relative silence. Norbert was pensive, Mirabella was nervous, and the children sensed the tension and also spoke little. Only the clinking of forks on plates broke the silence in the dining room. After dinner, Norbert locked himself in his home office to prepare for the evening service. Mirabella was washing the dishes when her phone vibrated quietly. A message from Michael. Thinking of you. When will we see each other? She quickly deleted the message and looked around to see if anyone had seen her. Her heart was beating so loudly that she thought the whole house could hear it. Monday began for Mirabella Cooper with her usual routine. Getting up at 6 in the morning, making breakfast for her family, and seeing the children off to school. But today, everything seemed unreal, as if she were playing a role in a play and had forgotten her lines. Norbert had left for church early, saying he had a meeting with the deacons about expanding the children's center. The children had left for school, and the house was quiet. Mirabella taught 3rd grade at Jefferson Elementary School, just a 15-minute drive from home. In her 11 years on the job, she had earned a reputation as one of the best teachers in the school, patient, creative, and loving toward her students. But today, standing in front of a class of 28 8-year-olds, She found it difficult to concentrate on the math lesson. "Mrs. Cooper, why are you so sad today?" asked Sophie Martinez, a bright girl with curious brown eyes. Mirabella started, realizing she had been distracted by looking out the window. "I'm not sad, dear. I'm just thinking about how to explain the next problem to you." But Sophie was right. Mirabella felt broken, as if she were teetering on the edge of a precipice. Her affair with Michael had begun as an emotional connection, an attempt to find the understanding she lacked in her marriage. But now it had grown into something more, something that threatened to destroy her entire life. After school, she didn't go home, but to an old warehouse on the industrial outskirts of Anaheim where Michael's construction company was located. It was risky. Someone could see her, but she had to talk to him after yesterday's conversation with Norbert. The warehouse was a large metal building surrounded by trucks, construction equipment, and stacks of lumber. Workers in hard hats and reflective vests moved materials around, preparing for tomorrow's projects. Mirabella parked in the shade of an old oak tree and sent Michael a message. "I'm here." A few minutes later, Michael Cooper approached her car. At 37, he looked younger than Norbert, even though he was only 5 years younger. His dark hair was tousled, his hands and clothes were stained from work, and his eyes had the tired look of someone who had drunk too much the night before. But when he saw Mirabella, his face lit up with a smile that made him almost handsome. "I didn't expect to see you today," he said, getting into the passenger seat, "especially here." "Michael, I need to talk to you. Norbert suspects something." Michael's face immediately became serious. "What did he say?" "He knows you came last week. The neighbor saw your truck." Mirabella nervously fiddled with her keys. "And yesterday at church, when they mentioned your name, he looked at me strangely." Michael took her hand in his calloused palms. "Bella, maybe it's time to tell him everything. I'm tired of hiding, tired of pretending that you're nothing more than my sister-in-law." "Are you crazy? We have children, Michael. Norbert isn't just my husband. He's the head of the largest church in town. A scandal would destroy not only our family, but hundreds of people who believe in him." "What about what we believe in?" Michael turned to face her. "Bella, I'm in love with you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was always there, even before you married Norbert. But now I can't pretend it's just physical attraction." Mirabella closed her eyes. She remembered meeting the Cooper brothers 14 years ago. She was 25 at the time, working at a bank and attending a Baptist church at her parents' insistence. Norbert was a young, ambitious assistant pastor, and Michael was his younger brother, who rarely showed up at church but was always the life of the party at family gatherings. Norbert courted her persistently and methodically, as he did everything in his life. He was reliable, determined, and had clear plans for the future. At 25, that seemed exactly what she needed. Michael was just her fiancé's younger brother. Funny, unpredictable, but not serious. "Bella?" Michael's voice brought her back to the present. "I love you too," she whispered. "But that doesn't change anything. We can't. We can. Divorce him. We'll find a way to be together." "What about the children? Jacob and Emma adore their father, and you too. Can you imagine what will happen to them when they find out?" Michael let go of her hand and leaned back in his seat. "You know what the worst part is? Norbert always got everything he wanted. As a child, as a teenager, and now. He was a straight-A student, I was a dropout. He went to seminary, I barely finished high school. He built a successful career, I work with my hands, and he even got you first." His voice was filled with the bitterness that had built up over years of living in his older brother's shadow. "But you know what's really funny? He never appreciated what he had. He didn't appreciate you. To him, you're just part of his image, a pretty accessory to his successful career. That's not entirely fair." "Fair?" Michael turned to her, pain in his eyes. "Bella, when was the last time you felt like he saw you as a woman, not a symbol? When was the last time he asked you about your dreams, not how your day at school was?" Mirabella was silent because he was right. Norbert loved her in his own way, but it was the love of a man who saw his wife as part of his ministry to God. She was a good pastor's wife, the mother of his children, the adornment of his reputation. But when was the last time she felt like a desirable woman in his arms? "I have to go," she said finally. "The children will be home from school soon. Bella, think about what I said. We can't go on like this forever." She nodded and started the car. Michael got out and stood watching her drive away. In the rearview mirror, she could see his lonely figure against the industrial landscape. A surprise awaited her at home. Norbert was sitting in the living room, although he usually didn't come home until dinner. There were some documents on the coffee table. "You're early," Mirabella said, trying to make her voice sound natural. "The meeting ended sooner than planned." Norbert looked up from the documents. "Did you stay late at school?" "Yes, there was a parent-teacher conference." The lie came easily to her, which was frightening in itself. "I see." Norbert put the papers aside. "I need to discuss something with you. Please sit down." Mirabella felt her heart skip a beat. Had he found out something? She sat down in the chair opposite her husband, folding her hands in her lap. "It's about Michael," Norbert began. "Philip told me something interesting." "What exactly?" "It turns out Michael is having financial problems, serious ones. His company is on the verge of bankruptcy, and he owes the bank $200,000. Norbert leaned forward. "And now I understand why he's been coming around so often." Mirabella was confused. "I don't understand." "He wants to borrow money. He probably thinks it will be easier to get to me through you." Norbert's voice sounded a mixture of disappointment and anger. Typical of Michael, using family connections when he's in trouble. Mirabella felt relief mixed with pain for Michael. She knew his business was struggling, but she had no idea how bad things were. "Maybe we should help him?" she suggested cautiously. "Help?" Norbert stood up abruptly. "Bella, this isn't the first time. Michael has been getting into trouble his whole life, and I've always bailed him out. When he was 20, I paid off his gambling debts. When he was 25, I helped him find a job after he was fired for drinking. When he was 30, I gave him money for his first business, which he lost in 6 months." Mirabella had never heard these stories. Norbert rarely spoke about family problems, preferring to maintain an image of prosperity. "He's my brother, and I love him," Norbert continued, pacing around the room. "But there's a limit to my patience. Michael has to finally grow up and start taking responsibility for his actions. What if he really goes bankrupt? Then maybe it will be a lesson for him." Norbert stopped at the window. "You know what upsets me the most? It's not that he's a failure. It's that he never learns from his mistakes, and that he's willing to use our family to solve his problems." Mirabella felt a pang of guilt. Norbert was wrong about Michael's motives, but he was right that their relationship really affected the whole family. "Dad, is Uncle Michael coming to my birthday party?" Emma ran into the living room, just back from school. Norbert turned to his daughter, his face softening instantly. "I don't know, sweetheart. Uncle Michael is very busy right now. But he always comes, and he always brings the best presents." Mirabella saw her husband's jaw tighten. Michael really adored the children and always found time for them, even when he had problems. Unlike their father, who was often too busy with church matters. "We'll see," Norbert said. "Now go and do your homework." When Emma left, Norbert turned to his wife. "I don't want the children to see Michael until he sorts out his problems. I don't want them to think that irresponsibility has no consequences." "Norbert, that's too harsh." "It's necessary." His voice became cold. "And I don't want him coming here when I'm not at home. If he needs anything, he can call me." Mirabella realized that the discussion was over. But she also realized that Norbert had effectively forbidden her to see Michael, that he suspected more than he was saying. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, and Norbert had locked himself in his study to prepare tomorrow's sermon, Mirabella stood in the kitchen washing dishes and thinking about her life. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a career as a teacher, her position in society, all of it could be destroyed because of her affair with her brother-in-law. But what was the alternative? Another 15 years with a man who saw her as a function rather than a person. Another 15 years of pretending that their marriage was happy. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. She quickly picked up the receiver, afraid that the ringing would wake the children. "Hello?" "Bella, it's me." Michael's voice sounded drunk and desperate. "I need to see you." Michael, it's late. Norbert is home. I know about the ban. Philip told him about my debts, didn't he? His voice was a mixture of bitterness and anger. So now I'm officially persona non grata in my older brother's house. Where are you? At the bar on Harbor Boulevard. The Golden Anchor. Bella, I don't know what to do. The bank is taking me to court tomorrow. If I don't find the money, I'll lose everything. Mirabella glanced toward the study, where she could hear the soft click of keys. Norbert was typing his sermon. Michael, go home. We'll talk tomorrow. Home? He laughed bitterly. To my one-room apartment where the electricity has been cut off? You know what's funny? Norbert spends more on a Sunday suit than I earn in a month, but he won't give me a penny. That's not true. Bella, he hates me. He always has. I remind him of what he could have been if he hadn't found God. Michael paused. And you know what he said to Philip? That it's time for me to grow up and take responsibility for my actions. Easy to say when you were born lucky. She could hear the sounds of the bar through the phone. Music, voices, the clinking of glasses. Mirabella imagined Michael sitting alone at the bar, drowning his problems in alcohol. Michael, listen to me. Come to the school tomorrow morning. We'll talk it over and work something out. Work something out? Run away together? Abandon the children? Or do you think I should disappear from your life so I don't ruin your perfect marriage? Mirabella didn't know what to say because every option seemed impossible. I love you, she said quietly, but we need time to think things through. Time, Michael repeated the word as if it had a bitter taste. Do you know how long I've been waiting? 14 years, Bella. 14 years I've been watching you play the role of my brother's happy wife. The line went dead, and Mirabella realized he had hung up. She stood in the kitchen, holding the phone in her hand, feeling the world around her slowly crumble. Norbert's voice came from the study. Bella? Who were you talking to? Wrong number, she replied, surprised at how easy it was to lie. Wednesday began with rain, a rare occurrence for Anaheim at this time of year. Mirabella stood at the kitchen window, watching the raindrops run down the glass, distorting the view of the street. Norbert had left for his morning meeting with the church board, the children had gone to school, and the house was enveloped in a silence that weighed on her more heavily than usual. Her phone vibrated. A message from Michael. We need to talk. Today. It's important. She stared at the screen for a long time before replying, After school, the park by the lake. The day at school dragged on agonizingly slowly. The third graders seemed particularly noisy, and Mirabella caught herself raising her voice several times, which was completely out of character for her. During lunch break, the school principal, Susan Wright, came into her classroom. Mirabella, are you all right? You look tired. I just didn't sleep very well, Mirabella replied, trying to smile. Susan was not only her boss, but also a member of New Hope Church. The last thing Mirabella needed was questions about her personal life. Maybe you should take a sick day? We have substitute teachers. No, thank you, I'm fine. But everything was not fine. Mirabella felt her life falling apart and didn't know how to stop it. After school, she drove to Anaheim Lake, a small artificial lake in a city park where families picnicked and children fed the ducks. On a rainy day, the park was almost empty. Michael was already waiting for her, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. He looked terrible, unshaven with red eyes and wrinkled clothes. Michael, she said, sitting down next to him. Have you been drinking? A little. For courage. He turned to her. Bella, I've made a decision. Tomorrow I'm leaving Anaheim. What? Where? Portland. I have a friend there who offered me a job. Building bridges. Good money. A new start. Michael took her hand. Will you come with me? Mirabella felt the ground slip away beneath her feet. Michael, I can't. The children's school, my whole life is here. What life? You're miserable, Bella. I see it every time I look at you. You're playing the role of the perfect pastor's wife, but inside you're dying. What about the children? Jacob and Emma. I can't just abandon them. We'll find a way. Maybe they can visit us, or... Michael fell silent, realizing how absurd it sounded. Michael, listen to yourself. You're asking me to abandon my children for an affair with their uncle. It would destroy them. And if I stay, it will destroy us. Michael stood up and paced in front of the bench. Bella, I can't live like this anymore. Pretending we're just relatives, seeing how Norbert treats you like a piece of furniture, knowing that you go to bed next to a man who doesn't appreciate you. It's not that simple. Simple solutions for simple people. We're not simple, Bella. What we have is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Mirabella closed her eyes, feeling tears welling up in her throat. She knew Michael was right. She had been unhappy in her marriage for many years, but the thought of destroying her family, abandoning her children, caused her physical pain. Give me time to think, she said finally. How much time? A day? A week? A year? Michael's voice sounded desperate. Bella, I'm leaving tomorrow, with or without you. They sat in silence, listening to the rain falling on the leaves and the distant sounds of the city. Finally, Mirabella stood up. I have to pick up the children from school. Is that your answer? She looked at him, the man she loved but couldn't choose. I need time, Michael nodded, and she saw in his eyes that he understood that her answer had already been given. Another surprise awaited her at home. Norbert was standing at the living room window, looking out at the street. Her cell phone was lying on the coffee table, the one she had forgotten at home that morning. You forgot your phone, he said without turning around. Yes, I only noticed it at school. Mirabella carefully picked up the phone. The screen showed several missed calls, all from Michael. Michael called 4 times. Mirabella's heart began to race. Maybe it's something important. Maybe. Norbert finally turned to her. Bella, I need to tell you something. Philip came up to me this morning. He saw your car yesterday at the warehouse where Michael works. Mirabella felt the blood drain from her face. I was at the gas station next door. The gas station is 2 blocks away from the warehouse. Norbert's voice was even, but cold. And Philip saw you talking to Michael in your car. There was silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. Mirabella knew the game was over, but she wasn't ready to give up yet. He wanted to talk about his financial problems. Bella. Norbert said her name with such pain that she flinched. Please don't lie to me. Not now. She looked at her husband, the man with whom she had lived for 15 years, had 2 children, and built a life. In his eyes, she saw not anger, but deep, all-consuming pain. How long? He asked quietly. Norbert, how long, Bella? 3 months. The words came out of her mouth before she could stop them. But it's not what you think. What do I think? Norbert sat down in a chair, suddenly looking 10 years older. That my wife is sleeping with my brother. That the woman I loved more than life itself betrayed me with the only person I trusted unconditionally. We didn't sleep together, Mirabella said, but the words sounded pathetic even to her. Then what? Platonic meetings? Heart-to-heart talks? Norbert stood up and began pacing the room. Bella, I'm not an idiot. I saw how you looked at him. I saw how he looked at you. I thought it was just my imagination, but now... At that moment, the front door slammed open and the children ran into the living room. Mom, what's for dinner? Emma asked, but fell silent when she saw her parents' faces. Is Mom crying? Jacob approached Mirabella. At 14, he was old enough to understand that something serious was going on. Everything's fine, dear, Norbert said, instantly regaining his composure. Mom and Dad are just discussing adult matters. Go upstairs and do your homework. But, Emma began. Upstairs, now. The children left, glancing at each other and whispering. When their footsteps faded on the second floor, Norbert closed the living room door. You've destroyed our family, he said, and for the first time there was real anger in his voice. My children, my church, my life. Norbert, I never wanted to... What didn't you want, for me to find out or for this to happen at all? Mirabella didn't know how to respond. Because, to be honest, she didn't regret what had happened. She regretted hurting her husband and children, but not her feelings for Michael. I'm unhappy, Norbert, she said finally. For many years, you only see me as a pastor's wife, the mother of your children. But I am a living woman with my own needs and dreams. And that's why you went to my brother. Michael sees me as a woman. He listens to me. He understands me. Michael! Norbert slammed his fist on the table. Michael, who has envied me all his life. Who can't hold down a job, build a relationship, create something of his own, and you think he loves you? He just wants to take away what I have. That's not true! Bella, open your eyes. Michael is incapable of real love. All he knows is how to destroy. Norbert moved closer to her. But you know what's worst of all? You let him destroy us. There was a soft knock at the door. Mom? Dad? Jacob's voice could be heard. What is it, son? Norbert opened the door. Uncle Michael is here. He's standing on the porch. Mirabella felt as if the world had stopped. Norbert looked at her with eyes full of rage and pain. Tell your uncle that your father will be right out, he said to Jacob. When his son left, Norbert turned to his wife. Stay here and keep the children upstairs. He stepped out onto the porch, and Mirabella heard the front door slam. Through the window, she could see the silhouettes of two men talking, but she couldn't make out their words. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes. Then Michael turned and walked to his truck. Norbert stood on the porch, watching his brother drive away. When the red lights of the truck disappeared around the bend, he returned to the house. What were you talking about? Mirabella asked. I told him I knew about your relationship, and that if he ever came near my family again, I would destroy him. Norbert, and I also told him that you chose me, that you would stay with the children and never see him again. Mirabella looked at her husband, at this man who had just made a decision for her. What if I don't want to stay? Something changed in Norbert's eyes, something cold and frightening. Then you'll lose the children, and I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of mother and wife you are. You wouldn't dare. Try me. His voice was quiet, but it was filled with unwavering determination. Bella, you can leave whenever you want, but the children will stay with me, and I will tell them the truth about why their mother abandoned them. Mirabella realized she was trapped. Norbert knew her weakness. She could never leave Jacob and Emma, and he, as an influential pastor with an impeccable reputation, would easily win custody of the children in a divorce. So, Norbert continued, tomorrow you go to work as usual. Smile, act normal. On Sunday, sit in your usual place in church, and no one will ever know about your affair. And if I don't agree, then by Monday the whole community will know that Pastor Cooper's wife cheated on him with his own brother. The children will find out at school from their classmates. Your teaching career will be over. And Michael. Norbert smiled coldly. Michael already has problems with the bank. One word from me to the right people and he won't even be able to find a job as a janitor. Mirabella looked at her husband and didn't recognize him. This man was capable of destroying people's lives to save his own reputation. I understand, she said quietly. Fine, let's go have dinner. The children need to see that everything is normal in our family. The rest of the evening passed in a strange atmosphere of forced normality. They had dinner. The children talked about school. Norbert joked and smiled. But Mirabella could see how tense his shoulders were, how his jaw clenched when he thought no one was looking. Late in the evening, when the children had gone to bed and Mirabella was washing the dishes, Norbert sat in his study. But he wasn't preparing his sermon or reading the Bible. He sat in the dark and thought. He thought about how his wife had betrayed him with his own brother, about how everything he had built over the years was falling apart, about how he would now have to pretend every day that his marriage was happy, knowing the truth. And he also thought that there was only one way to solve this problem once and for all, a way that would never have occurred to old Norbert. But old Norbert didn't know what betrayal was. He took his notebook and began to write. The plan had to be perfect. No mistakes, no clues, and most importantly, a perfect alibi. Mirabella lay awake in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling. Norbert was sleeping next to her, but she could feel the tension emanating from him even in his sleep. She thought about Michael, who would be leaving for Portland tomorrow morning, about the children who would become victims of a broken family, about herself, trapped in a golden cage. Friday, November 15th. Mirabella woke up feeling like the world had changed forever. Norbert was already up and taking a shower. She could hear the water running in the bathroom. Their bed seemed huge and cold, as if there was a chasm between them. In the 2 days since the revelation, they had not spoken a word to each other beyond what was necessary. Norbert was emphatically polite to the children, but when they were alone, the air was thick with unspoken hatred. Mirabella felt like an actress in a play that was to continue until the end of her life. "Good morning," Norbert said, coming out of the bathroom in his bathrobe. His voice was even, almost friendly. "Good morning," she replied, without looking up. "We're having dinner with Philip and his wife tonight. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Mirabella had indeed forgotten. Monthly dinners with the Bell family were a tradition Norbert never broke. "Of course I remember. Great. I hope you'll make your famous meatloaf." Norbert walked over to the dresser and began selecting a shirt. "Philip loves it." The ordinariness of the conversation against the backdrop of what had happened seemed surreal. Mirabella looked at her husband's back, once familiar and close, now foreign. "Norbert," she said quietly, "we can't go on like this forever." He froze, holding the white shirt in his hands. "We can, and we will." The children can sense the tension. Yesterday, Emma asked why we don't talk to each other anymore. "Then we'll have to be better actors." Norbert turned to her. In the daylight, his face looked haggard, and his eyes were red from lack of sleep. "Or do you want them to know the truth about their mother?" The words hit Mirabella like a slap in the face. "I'm a good mother." "Good mothers don't cheat on their husbands with their brothers. And good husbands don't blackmail their wives with their children." A dangerous spark flew between them. Norbert took a step toward the bed, and Mirabella instinctively moved away. "Be careful, Bella," he said quietly. "You have no right to lecture me on morality." At that moment, Jacob peeked into the bedroom. "Mom, Dad, is breakfast ready?" Norbert's face changed instantly, becoming warm and fatherly. "Of course, son, we'll be right down." When Jacob left, Norbert looked at his wife one last time. "Remember, today is an important day. Philip is considering a large donation for the construction of a new wing for the church. I'm counting on your support." The day at school passed in a fog. Mirabella mechanically taught her classes, checked notebooks, and talked to her colleagues, but her thoughts were far away. She thought about Michael, who was supposed to leave for Portland yesterday. She wondered if she would ever see him again. She thought about her life, which had turned into a prison with golden bars. After work, she went to the supermarket to buy groceries for dinner. In the meat department, while choosing beef for a roast, she heard a familiar voice. "Mirabella?" She turned around and saw Linda Carter, a woman she vaguely remembered from church. Linda was an Anaheim police detective who had moved to the city a year ago. Tall, with short graying hair and piercing gray eyes, she looked like someone who had seen a lot in her life. "Oh, hi, Linda," Mirabella tried to smile. "How are you?" "Fine. How about you?" "You look tired." "Work, kids. You know how it is." Linda looked at her closely. Over the years on the force, she had learned to read people, and what she saw in the pastor's wife's eyes alarmed her. "If anything happens, Mirabella, you know where to find me." "What could happen?" Mirabella replied too quickly. "Nothing, I hope." Linda paused. "It's just that sometimes the happiest families hide the darkest secrets." Mirabella felt a chill run down her spine. "Everything's fine with us. Thanks for your concern." At home, she began to prepare dinner in a strange state of detachment. She chopped vegetables, mixed minced meat, rolled out dough, everything automatically like a robot. The children did their homework, and Norbert was at church for a meeting with the Board of Trustees. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Philip and Susan Bell arrived. Philip was in a good mood, full of plans for expanding the church. Susan, a quiet woman in her 50s, brought homemade wine and a bouquet of flowers. "Mirabella, dear, you look beautiful," Susan said, although it was an obvious lie. At dinner, Norbert was charming. He told funny stories from church life, discussed building plans with Philip, and asked about Susan's health. He was the perfect host, a caring husband and loving father. Mirabella sat next to him, smiling at the right moments and keeping the conversation going, but she felt like a puppet. "How's Michael doing?" Susan asked unexpectedly. "Philip said he's having financial difficulties." Mirabella felt Norbert's body tense up next to her. "Michael has decided to start a new life," Norbert replied in an even voice. "He left for Portland yesterday. He has good prospects there." How unexpected, Susan said in surprise. Didn't he say goodbye to the children? Uncle Michael left? Emma looked up from her plate. But he promised to come to my birthday. Sometimes adults change their plans, dear, Norbert said, stroking his daughter's head. Uncle Michael sent you a present in the mail. It was a lie, but Emma believed it. Only Jacob looked at his father with confusion. At 14, he already understood that adults don't always tell the truth. After dinner, when the guests had left and the children had gone to bed, Norbert and Mirabella were left alone in the kitchen. She washed the dishes, he dried the plates, a domestic idyll that was a complete farce. You did well today, Norbert said. Almost convincing. I'm not playing a role, Norbert. I'm just trying to preserve what's left of our family. Our family? He put down the plate so hard it clattered. You destroyed our family when you went to my brother. I destroyed it? What about you? You ignored me for years, treated me like a piece of furniture. Enough! Norbert slammed his palm on the table. Don't you dare blame me! I gave you everything. A home, status, security. And you? I wanted love, Mirabella said quietly. Just love. Not status, not security. Love. Something changed in Norbert's eyes. Something final and frightening. Love, he repeated. You know what I think love is? Love is loyalty, devotion, sacrifice. What you call love is selfishness and lust. Michael loved me. Michael wanted you! Norbert exploded. He wanted to take away what I had, and you let him do it! Mirabella took a step back. There was something in her husband's voice that made her danger instincts kick into high gear. Norbert, calm down. Calm down? He laughed, but it was a cold, crazy laugh. I spent 15 years building my reputation, 15 years creating the perfect family, the perfect life, and in 3 months, you destroyed it all. No one will find out. You said so yourself. They already know, he shouted. Philip knows. His wife suspects. Yesterday, Mrs. Jenkins asked why I looked so tired. Do you know how long it will be before the whole community is whispering about it behind my back? Mirabella realized that her husband was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Norbert, we can fix everything. We can start over. Start over? He moved closer to her. With a wife who cheated on me with my brother? With a wife who thinks about another man when she's lying next to me? No, Bella. Some things can't be fixed. Then what do you suggest? Divorce? Divorce? Norbert shook his head. Divorce would disgrace me in front of the community. I'd be removed from my position as pastor. The children would suffer. No, divorce is not an option. Then what? Norbert stared at her for a long time, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her blood run cold. You'll die, he said quietly. An accident. A robbery gone wrong. A home invasion. Something that will make people feel sorry for me and the children. Mirabella felt as if the world had ceased to exist. You can't be serious. I'm absolutely serious. Norbert's voice was calm and businesslike. Think about it logically. You're dead. Problem solved. The children get sympathy, not shame. I become a widower, not a cuckold. The community rallies around the bereaved family. Norbert, this is madness. You're a pastor. You can't. I am a man who has been betrayed by those closest to me. There was no emotion in his voice. I am doing what must be done. Mirabella backed toward the kitchen door, but Norbert blocked her way. Don't try to run, Bella. It's useless. The children will hear, she whispered. The children are asleep. I put sleeping pills in their hot chocolate. Horror filled every cell of Mirabella's body. You planned this? Of course. Do you think I would act on impulse? Norbert took a large meat knife from the kitchen drawer. Tomorrow morning, I'll find your body. A burglar broke into the house, and you tried to protect the children. A tragic story. The police will find signs of a break-in and missing valuables. The perfect crime. Norbert, please. Mirabella pressed her back against the refrigerator. Think of the children. They won't be able to live without their mother. They will. They will have a father who will devote himself entirely to them. And they will never know what their mother was really like. The knife flashed in the light of the kitchen lamp. Mirabella screamed, but the sound stuck in her throat. She tried to dodge, but Norbert was faster. The first blow landed in her stomach. The pain was incredible, blinding. Mirabella doubled over, trying to stop the blood oozing between her fingers. "Norbert," she croaked, "I love the children." "I love them too," he said, preparing for the next blow. "That's why I'm doing this." The second blow was to her chest, near her heart. Mirabella fell to the floor, feeling the life drain from her. The last thing she saw was her husband's face, calm, focused, without a trace of remorse. "I'm sorry, Bella," he said, delivering the final fatal blow. "But I had no choice." Mirabella Cooper died on the floor of her kitchen at 11:47 p.m. on Friday, November 15th. Her last thought was of her children, sleeping upstairs under the influence of sleeping pills. Norbert stood over his wife's body for several minutes, coming to his senses. Then, as if following a premeditated plan, he began to act. He broke the back window of the kitchen, knocked over several chairs, took Mirabella's jewelry out of her jewelry box, and hid it in the garage. He made it look like a struggle and a robbery. Then he went to the bathroom, washed off the blood, and changed into clean pajamas. He washed the knife thoroughly and put it back in the drawer. It wouldn't attract attention among the other knives. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Norbert went to bed and set the alarm for 7 in the morning. Tomorrow he would wake up, go down to the kitchen for coffee, and discover his wife's body. He would scream, call the police, and play the role of a grief-stricken widower. The perfect crime. Saturday, November 16th, 7:23 a.m. Norbert Cooper's scream woke up the whole neighborhood. "Help! Someone! Help! Mirabella!" Neighbors ran out into the street in their bathrobes and pajamas. Mrs. Adams, who always got up early, was the first to reach the Coopers' house. She found Norbert on his knees next to his wife's body, sobbing and shaking her shoulders. "Norbert, what happened?" she asked, gasping for breath. "I don't know. I went downstairs to get some coffee and oh my God, someone killed my wife." The Anaheim police arrived 8 minutes later. Patrol officers Rodriguez and Chen were the first to arrive at the scene. They cordoned off the crime scene, called an ambulance, and the forensic team. Norbert was taken to the living room, away from the body. Detective Linda Carter received the call at 8:15 a.m. The crime scene was crowded. Forensic technicians photographed the kitchen, neighbors huddled behind the police tape, and journalists were already beginning to gather. Linda entered the house, showing her badge to a young officer at the door. The kitchen looked like a battlefield. Overturned chairs, a broken window, bloodstains on the floor and walls. Mirabella's body lay next to the refrigerator in a pool of blood. 3 stab wounds, 2 in the torso, 1 in the neck. Clearly not accidental blows. "What do we have?" Linda asked crime scene investigator Jim Morrison, a stocky man with a gray beard. "A 39-year-old woman, multiple stab wounds. Estimated time of death between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. The knife is from a kitchen set and was found in the sink." Jim pointed to a large meat knife. "It's been washed, but there are microscopic traces of blood on the blade. Any signs of a struggle?" "The furniture has been knocked over, but there are no defensive wounds on the victim's hands. That's strange for someone who was fighting back." Linda nodded, making notes in her notebook. "Where did you find the husband?" "In the living room, crying. He says he came downstairs this morning and found the body." "The children?" "Upstairs, fast asleep. Even their father's screams didn't wake them." This seemed strange to Linda. The children should have woken up from such a commotion. She went upstairs and looked into the children's rooms. A 14-year-old boy and an 11-year-old girl were sleeping deeply, unnaturally. "Call a doctor," she said to Officer Rodriguez. "Check the children for drugs in their blood." In the living room, Norbert Cooper sat in an armchair with his head in his hands. He was dressed in blue pajamas and a bathrobe. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were red from crying. The image of a grief-stricken husband. "Mr. Cooper? Detective Carter, Anaheim Police Department. I need to ask you a few questions." Norbert raised his head. "Detective Carter? We met at church." "Yes, I remember." Linda sat down across from him. I'm very sorry for your loss. I know how hard this is, but the sooner we get information, the sooner we can find the person who did this. Of course, anything you need. Norbert wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. I just can't believe she's dead. Tell us what happened. I went to bed around 11:30. Mirabella was in the kitchen washing the dishes after dinner with friends. I went downstairs for coffee in the morning and found her. Did you hear anything during the night? A struggle? Screams? Nothing. I sleep very soundly, especially when I'm tired. Norbert shook his head. If only I had known. If only I had heard. And the children? They were asleep too. They had a hard day yesterday and went to bed early. Linda wrote down every word. Tell me about last night. Who came to visit? Philip and Susan Bell, old friends. They left around 10. How was your wife feeling? Was there anything unusual about her behavior? Norbert paused as if considering his answer. She seemed tense the last few days. Work at school, taking care of the kids, but nothing out of the ordinary. Did she have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted to harm her? Mirabella? My God, no. Everyone loved her. The children, her colleagues, the parishioners. At that moment, Officer Chen entered the living room. Detective, we need to talk. Linda stepped out into the hallway. What did you find? The children's blood tests showed traces of zolpidem, a sleeping pill, enough to keep them asleep until morning. Prescription drug? Yes, and something else. Mrs. Adams' neighbor said she saw the lights on in the house until 2 in the morning. Someone was walking around on the first floor. Linda returned to Norbert with more questions. Mr. Cooper, do you take sleeping pills? Sometimes. I have trouble sleeping because of stress at work. Zolpidem? Yes, my doctor prescribed it a month ago. Did you take any yesterday? No, I fell asleep without any problems. I see. Linda made a note. What about the children? Do they take any medication? Just vitamins. Why, is something wrong? Just a routine check. Linda didn't explain the test results. One more question. A neighbor saw a light on in your house after midnight. Could that have been you? Norbert frowned. I don't remember getting up. Maybe Mirabella didn't turn off the light in the kitchen? Possibly. Linda closed her notebook. That's all for now, but I'll be back with some more questions. After the police left, Norbert was alone with his children who had finally woken up. Jacob and Emma couldn't understand what was going on. The house was full of strangers. Their mother wasn't answering their questions and their father was crying. Dad, where's Mom? Emma asked, coming down to the living room in her pajamas. Norbert hugged his daughter, and his tears were sincere, because despite everything, he loved his children and understood that he had destroyed their lives. Something terrible has happened to your mom, sweetheart. What terrible thing? She died, Emma. Your mom isn't coming back. His daughter's cry tore his heart apart. Jacob stood in the doorway, trying to comprehend what he had heard. At 14, he was old enough to understand the finality of death. How? His son asked in a hoarse voice. Someone broke into the house at night. Mom tried to protect us. That was the version Norbert had rehearsed. Mirabella was a heroic mother who died protecting her family. But the words hurt him because he knew the truth. The next few days were a nightmare. The funeral, condolences, journalists at the house. The entire New Hope community rallied around the bereaved family. Philip Bell took charge of organizing the memorial service. Parishioners brought food and helped with the children. But Detective Carter continued to dig. She interviewed all of Mirabella's neighbors and colleagues and studied the family's financial records. And the more she learned, the more she doubted the robbery theory. On Tuesday, she went to the church to talk to Norbert. He was in his office, preparing for his wife's memorial service. How are the children? Linda asked, sitting down across from his desk. They're having a hard time. Emma hardly speaks, and Jacob is angry at the world. That's normal. Time heals. Linda opened her notebook. I have some questions about your marriage. Norbert tensed. What exactly are you interested in? Did you and your wife have any problems? Arguments? Disagreements? Like any married couple, but we loved each other. What about your brother Michael? When was the last time you saw him? Last week. He went to Portland on business. Interesting. Linda checked her notes. And Mr. Bell says he saw Michael near your house on Wednesday evening. After that, He left in a state of extreme distress. Norbert froze. Philip could have been mistaken. Unlikely. He knows your brother well. Linda leaned forward. Mr. Cooper, I have something to tell you. We found your wife's jewelry in the garage, hidden behind the tools. What kind of burglar would hide the loot at the scene of the crime? Norbert's face turned pale. I don't know. Maybe something scared him? Or maybe someone wanted to make it look like a robbery? Linda stood up. Mr. Cooper, I have reason to believe that your wife's murder was not a random crime. What do you mean? I'll be back tomorrow morning with a search warrant. I suggest you think about whether there's anything you'd like to add to your statement. That night, Norbert couldn't sleep. He realized that his careful plan was falling apart. Detective Carter was not the simple-minded law enforcement officer he had counted on. In the morning, the police arrived with a warrant. They searched the entire house, confiscating the computer, telephone, and documents. In the home medicine cabinet, they found a package of zolpidem with missing pills. In Norbert's internet search history, they found queries about how long drugs remain in children's blood. Linda arrested him on Thursday morning while the children were at school. Norbert Cooper, you are under arrest on suspicion of the first-degree murder of Mirabella Cooper. You have the right to remain silent. At the police station, Norbert finally broke down, perhaps because he could no longer bear the burden of guilt. Maybe because he realized the game was over. He told the whole truth, about his wife's affair with his brother, about his rage and pain, about how he planned the murder. She ruined everything, he said, staring at the table. 15 years of marriage, my reputation, my children's future. I couldn't let her just walk away. What about the children? Linda asked. Did you think about them when you killed their mother? I thought only of them, Norbert flashed. They would have grown up branded as the children of an adulteress. They would have lived in shame because of their mother. Now they will remember her as a heroine who died at the hands of her own husband. Norbert fell silent. That truth was too horrible even for him. The trial took place 8 months later. Norbert pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with intent. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jacob and Emma moved in with Mirabella's aunt in San Diego. Philip Bell became the temporary pastor of New Hope Church until the community recovered from the shock. Michael Cooper returned from Portland for the trial. He testified about his affair with Mirabella and recounted his last meeting with his brother. He looked broken, a man who had lost the woman he loved and the brother he once respected. After the verdict was handed down, Linda Carter stood on the steps of the courthouse answering questions from reporters. It was her first high-profile case in Anaheim, and she handled it perfectly. Detective, what made you question the robbery theory? Asked a reporter from a local newspaper. The details. In this job, details are always important. Linda looked at the courthouse. And intuition. Sometimes people tell the truth with their eyes, even when they lie with their words. She remembered meeting Mirabella at the supermarket, her frightened look, her unspoken plea for help. Perhaps if Linda had been more persistent then, the tragedy could have been avoided. But that was a lesson for the future. In detective work, there are always cases that could have been solved better, faster, more efficiently. The important thing is to learn from your mistakes and not repeat them. Norbert Cooper is serving a life sentence in a California state prison. His children have grown up and started their own families, but they never visit their father. The New Hope community eventually recovered from the scandal, but the memory of the Cooper family tragedy lives on in the hearts of the parishioners.